All right, let's talk some more now. This case is still picking up steam, even with Alec Murdaugh being sent off to prison, because many are wondering what is next for him. So much to unpack, and we have two great guests to help me do it. Joining us this morning in Greenville, South Carolina, podcaster and the host of Pretty Lies and Alibis, Gigi McKelvey. And in Orlando, Florida, jury consultant and human behavior expert, Susan Constantine. Good morning to you, ladies. I'm so happy to have you both on the show. This is a power panel for sure with you two. So to kind of set the scene for everybody, Gigi, you were there every single day in court watching this trial, start to finish, from opening statements up until the time Alec Murdaugh went bye-bye off to prison. First question for you, was there anything that shocked you? Because you knew a lot about this case going in. You had done a lot of research. You were talking about it in your podcast. Was there anything that really made your head spin, please?
Oh, gosh, where do I start? I think the biggest moment for me was when he took the stand. And were you at the kennels that night? Yes, because it really stunned everybody. We knew he had been down at those kennels. We had heard it over and over with every witness that knew him. But to hear him get up on the stand, very matter of fact, say yes, even the jury, you could kind of see a whoa moment, like, wow, he just admitted he's been lying. So I think that right there, to me, was the biggest moment of the whole trial.
Oh, most definitely. When he was caught in the biggest lie of them all, the lie that really helped solidify this case against him for the state of South Carolina. The juror that agreed to speak with Court TV that we just saw, James Mcdowell, address this issue, the kennel video. Let's take a listen to some of what he told our crew.
I think I took each piece of evidence for what it was worth. You know, whether I could rely on it or whether I couldn't, but I wouldn't say that one really... That one's a tough one because at the end is whenever I make my decision, and that's whenever I figure out how much they weigh. You know what I'm saying? So that's whenever I kind of figure that out. I would say, and I don't know if this is really what you're looking for, but the kennel video was definitely a huge piece of evidence.
Yeah, it was. It was critical. In fact, the prosecutors say they don't know that if they could have gotten a conviction without that video. Would you agree with that?
You know, I don't know what goes into that process, but I know that that was a huge part of the case.
Susan Constantine, let me tap into your expertise, please, as a jury consultant. So lawyers, so everybody knows, you know, they will have you brought in on a case, travel with them, assess everything from the jury selection process to sitting in the trial, watching them is what they're picking up on. And how I wish you could have been in the courtroom with Gigi and with our Court TV team members there watching this firsthand. But something in general I really wanted to talk about, and I was saying this off the air, both on the air throughout this trial, how it's been my experience that jurors are really smart, and sometimes I think they're not given enough credit for seeing what all of us are seeing as we're watching the trial on Court TV. Would you kind of speak to that in having watched this process, given us tremendous analysis all throughout, and now here we are knowing the decision?
Well, one of the things that really stood out to me, Julie, was the fact that they prayed before they started. So they weren't just really basing it just on their own observations of what they heard and the evidence that was presented, but they also tapped into the other part of them, which is wanting to make that right decision. I want to let you know that I do the same thing. Every time I'm on air or anytime I'm analyzing or picking a jury, I always pray before I go because I want to use that wisdom too. So what goes into jury selection is, first of all, is understanding what demographic profile you may be looking for, right? So understanding what the state's case may be, the defense case may be, what are the weaknesses and strengths, what types of individuals do we think would be best suited for either side? From that, then, of course, we have voir dire, right? So we're able to ask those questions, the more probative questions, and that's when I'm analyzing their nonverbal behavior, also in the words that they use, sifting out what they're saying and decoding it to determine if there's any sort of hidden biases or if they have information that might hinder coming to a verdict or holding it against the client based on some of their background and experiences they've had. So all of these things are really important, and watching, like what Gigi was talking about, being there in the courtroom is invaluable, because then you're able to see the movements of jurors who are connecting, and you may not realize that they're actually sometimes shifting their body language more towards one juror than the other to seeing that if there is more rapport there. Because a lot of times when people tend to mute near each other, they tend to vote the same way. So there's a lot of nuances that I look at when I'm reading people and doing the, not just voir dire, but helping an attorney throughout that process and shifting questions that might appeal to certain particular jurors that they may be confused or confronted with, that they may have some misunderstanding, because you actually can see that on their facial expressions.
Oh, sure. This is really helpful, Susan. Yeah, who knows? But actually, we do have someone who knows what that may have been about. We have the expert on the show, Susan Constantine. What do you make of the Kleenex in the ears, the blanket over the head, the back against the wall?
Well, there's a lot of things going on. First of all, that she's leaning back, right? So if she's leaning back, she's disengaging the blanket over her head, disengaging, Kleenex in her ear, tuning everything out. But it also could be a sensory overload. So when we look at those things, and here's what's really important, and I think Gigi and Julie, both of you would agree with me on this one, is that you can't take a specific clue and then assign it to something. It is much more complicated than that. You have to understand, what is the stimulus, what's being told, and then how is that person reacting? And then you're trying to find some normative behavior to find out that's outside their norm, or if this woman is just a little bit odd. Because like I tell you what, in the Casey Anthony trial, and I sat all the way through that with Vinnie Politan, he was there, that we had one juror that leaned back and that fell asleep and he was not even engaged at all. So we do find this happening, because when we get to the sensory overload and information overload, naturally our instinct is to what? Disregard it, tune it out. And I think that's what she was doing.
That makes a lot of sense. This is great. And by the way, we have a sleeper apparently on the Ice Cream Man murder trial that they're keeping a close eye on right now. Susan, you know this, it happens. Sometimes you just get those sleepy jurors, got to wake them up somehow. Boy, you two are fantastic. We're going to continue the conversation with Susan Constantine and Gigi McKelvey right after this. Susan Constantine, I want to pick your brain, please, about Buster. You gave us such phenomenal analysis as this was happening. And so many people were wondering, why wasn't he crying? But here, getting this inside scoop from Gigi, looking at him, in very close proximity to see that he was, wiping away tears from his eyes and dabbing his nose and all that, shows that perhaps he was more emotional than he let on. What do you think, please?
Yeah, and thank you so much for bringing that up, because one thing I want to go back just a little bit when you're talking about the finger, right? So what people were talking about is an emblem. So in the United States, we know that what that gesture means. But here's where the problem is. This is what I have an issue with, is that when you assign something subjectively, as if that is truth, right? Just because he was doing that, you couldn't see all the angles. So you didn't know that he had two fingers that were behind him and not just the one, which was the middle finger. So I am a big stickler on, reading the signs accurately and not adding to it. So what Buster does is, his way of dealing with trauma is to internalize, okay? He's in deep thought, he's a deep thinker, but you can see, like what Gigi was talking about, is that there are masked emotions that he is concealing. You can see it in his forehead, you can see it on those those wrinkles across, you can see the outer corner furrow that kind of push in, causing these horizontal lines across his face. His deep focus in his eyes, sometimes he would kind of go off and internalize and process information. Other times you might see a little bit of eye rapid blinking, which is more anxiety. But he just is a kind of guy that internalizes, and that's it. So adding anything more than that, like saying, well, his eyes are moving to the right or either moving up to the left, is all debunked science. So I want your viewers to understand that when they are reading or deciphering different movements, you have to realize that there's some of this stuff is just subjective. And unless you add the validated science to it that's been vetted in the field, it's just a gesture without any other clues. So you have to cluster them together, find out what the stimulus is, and watch the movement, and then code it. Just so you know, this is a coding book, okay? I have a book here that I use. that is over 450 pages. So I take this stuff pretty seriously. And I want to make sure that it's coded accurately and I'm getting accurate information to your viewers.
Preach, Susan, preach. I love it. I love everything you said. We shouldn't speculate. We shouldn't speculate. I didn't even talk about it on the show, and that was purposeful because I didn't know. I didn't know if it was the real reason, you know, so I left it alone purposefully. And but I appreciate you saying that because, yes, we have to be very, very, very careful. And a screen grab or a still photograph doesn't necessarily indicate what is the truth there. So appreciate that. Poor Buster. Hopefully he is getting the trauma therapy that he surely needs in going through all of this. Really, really good stuff here. Ladies, thank you so much for being on the program this morning. I have to say goodbye, but I hope you'll both come back very soon. Gigi McKelvey, Susan Constantine, thank you both so much. Excellent analysis and insight you've shared with us. Take good care.